This week's episode is sponsored by the Brilliant Futures Institute.
I went and visited that gallery and I saw his work and I was like, man, that's what I want to do. I want to do something like this guy. And he is so much better than me. And I need to learn whatever I can to try to get to that level. I was really driven by this love for a certain style of art, and I just felt something inside of me that caused me to believe I could do that.
Welcome to the Preeminence Podcast.
You cannot be a courageous leader if you're not vulnerable.
Your legacy is every life you've touched.
The only thing that changes our life long term is when we raise our standards.
Now is the time to take risk.
The way it's always been done isn't necessarily the way it should be done.
What is your dream? What do you think 2050, 2100 is going to look like?
The most incredible sort of mystery, I think, is now the question of what comes next.
Stay hungry, stay foolish.
Welcome to the Preeminence Podcast. I'm your host, Matthew J. Peters. Visit preeminence.tv to learn more about how to create a preeminent presence for your business, organization, or personal brand. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or just ask Alexa to play the Preeminence Podcast. Today, my guest is American hyper-realist painter Stephen Kozar. Steve began his professional career as an artist just after dropping out of art school in 1986. Painting primarily in watercolor with the occasional use of oil and acrylic paints, Kozar's works are based on his travels through his native Wisconsin, the midwestern state in the USA. Like many artists in his field, Kozar uses photographs from his travels as references back in his studio. The resulting paintings are subtle and cohesive. Kozar layers colors on top of one another, allowing him to capture the light beautifully and create a unique atmosphere so typical in his works. It's important to note that although photographs are used as references in the early stages of his process, Kozar remembers the captured landscapes with a romantic mind's eye. So, Steve, when did you first notice your attention to detail?
I was just thinking about this recently, and I'm pretty sure the most early memory would be when I was maybe 5 years old. My mom gave me some cutoff shorts to wear, some jean shorts, and they had the fringe because they're not hemmed properly, so there's little strings hanging down. I don't know why I remember this because it's utterly pointless, I guess, in the overall scope of my life, but I threw a fit. I was like a little brat, and I wasn't a brat. I was a good kid. For the most part, I was a well-behaved. I was never bratty, but I just screamed and fussed because I didn't like these fringes on my shorts. That's what I was like. I was like this, out of control. And I'm pretty sure if I asked my mom about it, she would say, yeah, you were fussy about certain detail-y type things. And I did have an interest in art from as early as I can remember. And I liked drawing things as accurately as I could from as early as I can remember. Occasionally, I would do things that were kind of fantastic or cartoonish or whatever, but for the most part, that was never my interest. It was always accuracy, detail, clarity, that sort of thing.
So when you were young, did you have a lot of friends or did you hang out by yourself? Did you just observe a lot of things? What were you like when you were a child? I
would say I was pretty friendly. I know that there is that idea that a really creative person, like for instance, Andrew Wyeth, one of my favorite painters, he was sickly and he spent a lot of time home with his dad, who was a great artist himself. And so he was just hanging around his dad's studio, a lot of time to himself, very introverted. And that really wasn't me. I was that way, maybe to an extent. I did spend time reading and looking at pictures and books, and I did a lot of drawing in my room, but at school, it wasn't like I was antisocial or anything. So I guess I had just some of those characteristics.
And did you do well in school?
Yeah, I was pretty good. I remember struggling with the mathematic classes, things that were more on the engineering side and mathematical side, scientific side. That was never as much of my interest. I liked English. I liked art by far more than anything else. Gym class was no big deal. I did well in school without trying very hard, except for when I struggled with maybe some of the math classes. When I was in high school, I had two different art teachers at our art school. And I remember, I think it was my sophomore year, maybe my junior year, but I was kind of doing my own thing. I was working really hard on my own drawings, my own projects. And there was a time where I don't remember if it was both teachers or one of the teachers was saying, Steve, you're not clear on which project is for my class and which project is for the other teacher's class. And they were kind of mad at me. And I was clueless because I was just in my own little world making these drawings that I thought were going to be so great. And it was really neat. I'm pretty sure it was Bill Weber. I think it was him who said, you know what, that was really not important for me to make such a fuss over which drawing is done for which class. I just want to encourage you to do your best work. And if it's going to be part of my class or the other teacher's class, I'm not going to make a fuss over it. He was really encouraging. Both of my art teachers in art school were very encouraging and gave me the hope that this is something I could pursue further as some kind of a vocation.
So when did it turn from just a class to something you wanted to pursue? Did you go to an art school, or if you did, what was it like in that transition? Were you painting? Were you doing sculpture? What type of media did you use?
Yeah, I always liked drawing the most, which led me to watercolor. And it was that same teacher, Bill Weber, in high school who said, Steve, you really ought to try watercolor, because he knew that I liked drawing. He knew that I liked Andrew Wyeth, and Andrew Wyeth was primarily a watercolorist. So I actually got the school library at the time had some Andrew Wyeth books, and I just copied one of the Andrew Wyeth paintings. And it looked really good. And I got so excited because I was able to use this medium to do a painting that it's like, man, I think I'm getting the hang of this really quick. And I'm feeling all this passion and excitement about what I might be able to do with watercolor. So it was a lot of smaller steps along the way. After high school, I was tired of school and I just wanted to work for a while. Wasn't really sure about a lot of things. So I was doing construction work, and I worked for this guy who had a really unusual business taking down old barns and then using the frame to rebuild them into houses. And one of the barn frames, we had taken all the siding and the roofing off, so all that was left was this frame. And in order to put it back together again, it had to be drawn and mapped out. And so the different beams had, C4, C5, C6, and so somebody went up with this big crayon type of thing and actually marked on the beams, but then I got the job of sitting there and making a drawing of the frame. And it's a nice summer day. And normally what I'm doing is I'm, swinging a hammer and I'm doing all this grunt work. And I enjoyed hanging out with my friends that we worked together and stuff. But I remember just sitting there thinking, wow, I'm an artist. Why am I not doing art? Why am I, confining myself to construction work? Not that there's anything wrong with construction work, but I just really was struck by the fact that I love drawing. I love art. Why am I not doing this more? But as it turns out, I did go to Illinois State, and I found a couple of professors that really encouraged me. In fact, one of them encouraged me to not stay at Illinois State. I took some of my watercolor paintings to his office, and I was actually afraid to show my paintings to most of the professors because there was a big push towards modern art and abstract art and very conceptually based art. And I thought, this guy seems like the kind of person that would give me a really good, honest answer about my work. And I showed him my watercolors that I had done really either in high school or after high school. When I was doing that construction job, I was painting a little bit here and there, but really frustrated by my lack of training. So I was just doing the best I could. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I showed these paintings to this professor, and he said, these are very good. I suggest that you pursue this further. He mentioned to me a guy named James Wynn, who was a painter that had gone to both Illinois State University and the American Academy of Art. And he was about 10 years old, or I should say he is about 10 years older than me. And he was having success as a fine art painter at a gallery in Chicago. He was selling landscape paintings, these very beautiful, very realistic landscape paintings. I wound up going to that school in Chicago. And I also looked up a lot of the artists that were doing more realistic types of painting. And I was trying to figure out, what are they doing? Where do they sell their work? How do they get trained? So I was not only going to school and loving all the learning that I was finally getting, I was going to this much more rigorous, more traditional art school. But after a full day of drawing and painting, on the way home, I would stop at one of the big bookstores, because this is in Chicago, so I had a lot of resources, which was great. This is before the internet. Or I would go to the Chicago Public Library, and I would use the Guide to Periodical Literature. If I saw one artist whose work was really good, I would look him up and I would find every article that was written about that artist. And I would learn about the galleries that carried that sort of work. I would learn about the curators that were writing about that sort of work. And I found out more about this guy, James Wynn, and I discovered the gallery that carried his work in Chicago. And I went and visited that gallery and I saw his work and I was like, man, that's what I want to do. I want to do something like this guy. And he is so much better than me. And I need to learn whatever I can to try to get to that level. And I was really driven by this love for a certain style of art. And I just felt something inside of me that caused me to believe I could do that.
So you were struck by the realistic nature of some of Wynn's work. And what is it that you do right now?
I've been doing this for 30 years. So when I started painting, I was really influenced by James Wynn and a handful of other midwestern landscape painters. Harold Gregor was another one, and he was actually a teacher at Illinois State University. If I had stayed there, I eventually would have had him for a teacher, but I never did. But he was doing very, very realistic farm scenes. They were Midwestern. And of course, I related to that because I grew up in the Midwest. But so I started painting landscape scenes that were primarily rural, farm related, but not necessarily focused completely on agriculture, but that was just an element of it. Sometimes I would just do the land, the sky, the hills, the trees. I love that feeling of space. I love that feeling of the peacefulness that you find in the natural world. So I was portraying that for most of my career. And I just kind of took a curve the last 5 or 8 years or so in finding that I was also now becoming much more fascinated with the urban landscape and with buildings and roads and bricks and windows and things that created more, just in an abstract way, they created more interesting elements to compose what would become a painting. I've always tried really hard to look at paintings, even though they're very realistic, and people even say all the time, they say, oh, this looks like a photograph. I can't believe that's a painting. It looks like a photograph. Are you sure that's not a photograph? I get that all the time. And I'm not trying to duplicate a photograph. I'm trying to make a really interesting painting. And so I think about what are a bunch of things that exist in the real world that if I stuck them within the rectangle that is a painting, that would make an interesting painting, whether it be a road or a building or a tree or a creek or a cloud or any elements of those things. I'm always thinking in an abstract way of combining elements that are in the real world into some sort of rectangle that becomes a painting. And it just happens that they also look very, very realistic.
So it's called Hyper-Realism?
I think it was about 1968, 69, maybe 1970. The term PhotoRealism was invented by Louis K. Meisel, who's an art dealer still operating in New York. And he's written a series of books. And the word photorealism was used initially. And some of those first generation painters who painted in that style, they really were painting what looked like a giant enlargement of a photograph, because they were coming out of the influences that were developed right before that time by what was called pop art. And the most obvious example of pop art would be Andy Warhol. If you think of him painting those Campbell soup cans, there was this real sense of irony and kind of dark humor underneath it. He was saying, I'm going to paint a giant soup can and you're going to think it's art, and I'm going to portray it as art, and you will believe me, and I will become famous. And it worked. And he was a very bizarre character. Out of pop art came this idea that, well, I'm going to take a mundane, poorly composed photograph, something that might be just scattered into a shoebox from your last vacation, and I'm going to make it into a giant painting. And so there was this sense of irony, sometimes even dark humor, maybe not, but in some cases, some of the early photorealist painters were not really painting realistically for the sake of making a beautiful painting in the traditional sense. But what happened was the general public, who had been seeing nothing but very abstract work for, decades, they saw photorealism and said, wow, that's good. That looks real. That guy's good. That took some skill. So photorealism had very particular beginnings, but over time, a lot of artists like myself and others, they weren't really drawn to that sense of irony so much as just trying to portray things with accuracy and to try to say, here's something that I want to make that I think is really, really beautiful. And oh, by the way, it's going to look very realistic. So hyper-realism, it tends to remove the connotations that sometimes are associated with photorealism. I paint these paintings that look so photographically real that people say, wow, it looks like a photograph. So if I was at a show, I'd have to constantly say, these aren't photographs. These aren't photographs. These are paintings. These aren't photographs. Even when I was going to art fairs for a while, I would have signs everywhere that said, these are not photographs. These are all paintings. And then people would look at them and they'd get really close and they'd say, oh, I can tell it's a painting. I see a brushstroke. So it was like they thought I was saying, this looks exactly like a photograph, doesn't it? I bet you can't tell that it's a painting, can you? That's not what I was saying. I was just trying to make it really clear that what you're looking at is a painting. If you think it's a photograph, you're going to miss what it is I was doing. I was actually making a painting, which is different than a photograph. It's made by hand. I used a paintbrush. It's a different animal.
I have one of your oil paintings in our kitchen. Was that something you did just for a short time?
That painting that you have is a really interesting part of my journey because it was part of a really difficult time in my life as an artist. This would be 1999, 2000, 2001, somewhere around there. I just had made some less than ideal business decisions. I wasn't making good money. I wasn't probably as focused as I should have been for a number of reasons. And I was unsure of my style. And I was unsure of, do I really want to continue doing this kind of work, especially in watercolor? And I gained an appreciation for more loosely done paintings, especially those done in oil paint. So I thought, I'm going to give that a try. I've never really tried it. So for a couple of years, I just taught myself how to do oil painting. Honestly, there's no reason why I shouldn't go back and do more of those because I enjoy it and I can do it and I enjoy doing it, but I just don't have enough time to do all the things that I, potentially could do. In the work that I do now, it just requires so much time and focus that I really, I need to focus on that primarily. But it was a healthy thing for me to do. It really was. And what happened was I worked in oils because I wanted to paint loosely. So I learned how to do that. I really enjoyed it. I came up with some good paintings. I sold a bunch of paintings. And then the more I became confident with the oil painting medium, the more they started to become really focused and detailed and, hyper realistic. And I realized, oh, there I go again. That's me. That's my personality showing itself in the paintings. And I thought, well, I really can't turn this off. If I have to force myself to turn off my own personality, maybe I should just stick to what I do, which is to paint things that are very detailed and very realistic. So now I do a combination of oils and acrylics and more watercolors than anything else. But I really do like all three mediums.
How long does it take you to paint the average painting?
Well, since I started doing these cityscape type paintings with more buildings and just more really intricate details, I'm only doing 4, 5, 6 paintings a year right now. And that's not good for a business person. It really isn't. If I don't sell 4 paintings, I only have 4 chances, to make money or 6 paintings or whatever. So that's just me, really pushing myself. But I am in a gallery right now in London, the +1 Gallery, which sells really, really good hyper-realist paintings. And I'm pushing myself because I want to, but I'm also pushing myself because in that gallery, I am up against some of the other painters in this genre who are, world class. I don't see a lot of sense in, turning down my fussiness right now. It just doesn't seem like a wise thing. So I'll probably continue to make really detailed paintings that take me forever.
Why bother with so much detail? I mean, couldn't you be creating a lot more paintings if you didn't spend so much time on the detail?
When I try to do paintings that are intentionally a little bit less detailed, I'll pick a subject that to me says, I can do this quicker. I don't get excited about it. It doesn't go as quickly as I thought it would go, and I don't really like the end result. It hasn't worked out very well in most cases. When I try to pick subject matter that is something I can do more quickly, it just isn't the best work. It's not bad work, It just isn't my best work. So I kind of put myself in this position. And my hope is if the gallery in London or something else continues to grow my reputation, then the price of each individual piece will continue to go up, and I will get compensated properly. But it kind of goes with the territory. When you're a fine artist, you make things that you don't know for sure that they will sell. Occasionally I get commission work, which is great. I have a couple of really good customers, and they love what I do. They appreciate what I do. So they will pay me up front for something that they want me to do. And it's because of those people that I'm able to survive largely, and then have things that also go to a gallery that may sell or may not.
With so much attention to details, would you consider yourself a perfectionist?
Yes, I would consider myself a perfectionist. And I find the topic of perfectionism really interesting because I don't think I'm a perfectionist in some of the ways that often cause a perfectionist to fail miserably. And I don't even know why that is, because I do have the tendencies of most perfectionists. And I have some friends who are perfectionists, and they exhibit some of those negative personality traits that drives me nuts. And I say to them, just finish the thing, would you? Just, finish the thing. It's really good. The only problem is it's not done yet. So one of the biggest problems that a perfectionist faces is never finishing something, because I think they're afraid that if I finish it, now I have to face the reality that it may not be perfect. So if I continue to say it's not done yet, I don't have to face the potential problem of admitting that it's not perfect. For all of you perfectionists who are listening to me right now, just finish the thing. Just be done with it. If you really want to be good at something, the process of finishing something, however long that takes, you do have to finish it. It's the next thing that you do, and the next thing you do, and the next thing you do that ultimately leads to you getting better. You can't get perfect on that one thing. As I'm sure, Matthew, all the things that you've done. You try something and you think it's a good idea, and you finish it and you go, oh, yeah, that worked, but that other thing didn't work at all. But I never would have learned that had I not done that thing. So now you want to do things that have enough risk that, it shows that you're pushing yourself, but you don't want to hurt yourself or hurt your relationships with your family and things like that. I don't ever recommend taking really, really serious risks, but you do have to push yourself and see what happens. And hopefully you have a good enough attitude that you can learn from it and realize I did some things well here, but it wasn't perfect, and that's okay. I learned from it. Now I'm going to move on.
I know that your faith is a big part of your life. I'm curious to know how your faith plays into the quality of your work and your pursuit of mastery.
That's a really good question, because I think I have developed and changed in my belief about that, because my faith is primarily, as a Christian, my faith is primarily about God redeeming me. So that to me is the real focal point and the real core of my faith. And it's after I realize that I am now free to live my life knowing that I will never be perfect, and perfection is not the goal. Other side of the coin is, God has given me a vocation. He's given me a job to do. And thankfully, I'm able to make enough of a living at this that I can pay my bills and, provide food and shelter and all those things. What I'm going to say next only applies to people who have the capitalist structure that we've been given. And that is, if we have the freedom in a capitalist free market economy to do something really, really well, and we have that personality, not everybody does, but if you do, well, wow, what a wonderful thing that we are blessed to be able to pursue. And it's not to build up ourselves and create a kingdom on earth. It's not to, even necessarily leave a legacy per se, because my faith is really my legacy. What I believe about God and about eternity is my real legacy. And if I leave paintings that, 500 years from now, people really love and appreciate, wow, that's amazing. That's wonderful. But you know what? I'm not going to be here. And that's something that I am totally comfortable with. I'm not going to be here. So if I get forgotten, doesn't matter, because I'm not going to be here. If I get praised and admired, doesn't matter, because I'm not going to be here. I hope that I have a lasting impact with my art, but I'm comfortable with the reality that it may not be. I am a competitive person, and I'm aware of that, and I'm I'm trying to learn, I guess, how to use that when it's appropriate in a healthy way. Like when I see a painter who's really, really good, a healthy response is to say, man, I don't know if I can be better than him, but I'm going to try. Not because I hate him or I want to beat him, but because I know what I'm capable of. And I see somebody better than me, and it actually can be a positive thing. But if we turn that into, I can't stand that guy, I want to clobber him. Well, then that's just selfishness. That's a very egotistical way of looking at things. So, and I'm trying to be really healthy about that the older I get. I don't want to be competitive just for the sake of beating other people. I only want to be competitive because that's my personality, and it can be healthy only in the sense that it helps me to become better at what I do.
So in your pursuit of mastery, do you think there's another aspect of it that would be beneficial to the listeners?
Well, actually, I would say two things. You need to get input from people who are professionals in that field, because I really have a concern for people who are honestly living in sort of a fantasy world where they really think they're good at something and they are not. And that's a delusional human characteristic that some people have, and it's just not healthy. And it's really sad to see what happens when people kind of, if you see those people in those reality TV shows who can't sing at all, and they get interviewed, and Ryan Seacrest or whoever says, "Why do you think you're going to be America's next idol, American Idol?" And they say, "Because I believe in myself and I know I'm the best singer in the world." And then they can't sing. So that's a really exaggerated version of this unhealthy, delusional understanding of who you are. So I think it's really good to get the input of people who you respect, who are honestly much better than you, who are truly outstanding in their field. I was telling you, I think the other day, about how if you're a musician and you go out and you play gigs, you get feedback from the audience right away. They clap. If they don't clap, you did something wrong. You're not connecting with your audience. And it's something that artists don't get. I don't really need my ego stroked per se. I don't need to get all puffed up, which is a real problem when you're young and egotistical. But I do need to be encouraged. Everybody does. Everybody needs to hear from somebody who's really good at what they do, who's doing the thing that you want to do. And maybe they're a little bit further along. I forgot to mention, James Wynn became a really, really close friend of mine who has been a great encourager to me. I can't tell you how many times I was like, man, I hate this. I'm not successful. I'm not as good as I think I am. I don't know what's wrong with me. But Jim is one of the guys who's been really encouraging to me. And there are a few other artists whose work I really respect. I've been encouraged by them, and I try really hard to do the same thing now as an older artist. There are artists that come to me and they want my input. I am just thrilled to be able to be an encouragement. And if they want some input, I'll say, well, you could work on this, this, and this, but man, you're really good at that, that, and that. And if they want to hear that from somebody like myself, I'm really glad to give that sort of input.
Steve, I've been a friend of yours, and I've known you since the mid-'90s, I think, early 90s. And I've just been watching your work over the years. I've one print and one original of yours that I always loved your attention to detail. You see things that others that they just kind of gloss over, and I think that is a testament to your observing the real world. You really give it that attention. So that's something I really admire in you. Thank you for being on the program today. And is there any other closing remarks you had?
You just brought up something that I kind of really forgot about in this whole conversation. And one of the things I love about what I do is painting something, a real scene that's from somewhere that either people are familiar with that actual scene, or it looks like something they're familiar with, but they see something in that scene that they could have seen in the real world, but they didn't. They were just kind of going about their life. And because I painted it and they saw it in my painting, now when they go for a drive, maybe just a regular drive back and forth to their job, they go, oh, look there's that thing I saw in a painting. There's that sense of light, or that feeling of space, or that atmospheric perspective that I saw in a Kozar painting. And now they appreciate it. And they have told me, I was out for a drive the other day and I was just doing errands, but I saw the beauty that I never noticed before. And I wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you for listening to the Preeminence Podcast. Subscribe to hear powerful interviews and insights each week, automatically downloaded the moment they go live. Share this episode with your team, your friends, and post it on social media. Let us know your comments and suggestions for the show at m@ascend.net. That's the letter M at ASYND.net.